Hey everyone, tonight we're diving into one of history's most successful propaganda campaigns, the transformation of ancient gods into demons, wise women into witches, and sacred symbols into signs of evil. Before we begin, hit like if you're ready to discover how Christianity created the devil by stealing from every religion it conquered, and let me know in the comments if you've ever wondered why Satan looks exactly like the pagan gods he supposedly opposes. Now dim those lights and settle in. We're about to explore how the most recognizable face of evil in human history was assembled from the fragments of murdered mythologies, and why the horns, hooves, and serpent's wisdom all tell a very different story than the one you learned in Sunday school. Now, without further ado, let's begin. The shadows gather differently in a world without Satan. Picture this. A Mesopotamian merchant awakens in the dead of night, 3000 BC, sweat beading on his forehead as nightmares claw at his mind. But when he reaches for protection, he does not clutch a cross or whisper prayers against a singular dark lord. Instead, he murmurs to Marduk for order, to Ishtar for favor, to a dozen different gods who might shield him from a dozen different harms. Evil, in his world, has no single face, no unified will, no cosmic throne from which it rules. This is the world before the devil, and it is stranger, more complex, more terrifyingly beautiful than the one that came after. In ancient Sumer, when the first cities rose like islands from the flood-dark earth, chaos wore the face of Tiamat, the primordial waters, neither good nor evil, but simply older than order. She births monsters not from malice, but from the raw creative force that predates morality itself. When Marduk slays her, it is not righteousness conquering sin. It is the young world learning to impose structure on the beautiful, terrible chaos that birthed it. The priests know this. They carve it into clay tablets that will survive empires. Tiamat is not Satan. She is the sea before shores were dreamed, the darkness before light learned its own name. To destroy her is necessary. To call her evil is to misunderstand the very nature of creation. Travel west, where the Nile cuts its green path through endless sand. Here, Set tears his brother Osiris apart, scattering pieces of the god across Egypt like bloody seeds. The priests in their tall temples know Set's story, know his rage, know his necessary violence. But they do not preach that Set is evil incarnate, master of all darkness, tempter of all souls. Set is desert storm and jealous brother, chaos and preservation both. For without his violence, the cycle cannot turn. Osiris cannot be reborn. The floods cannot come. The Egyptians understand something that will be forgotten, that destruction serves life, that chaos serves order, that what appears evil may be the very mechanism by which good renews itself. Set is not Satan because Satan cannot serve anything but himself. In the olive groves of Greece, where marble gods dream under Mediterranean stars, Hades rules the underworld with quiet dignity. The dead are his subjects, not his victims. The darkness he commands is not evil. It is simply the other half of existence, as necessary as light, as natural as breathing. When Persephone descends to his realm, she does not fall to temptation. She becomes queen of a kingdom that must exist, that has always existed, that will exist long after the last prayer echoes into silence. The Greeks see this clearly. Their gods are not moral teachers, but living forces, as complex and contradictory as the humans who worship them. Zeus rapes and thunders and protects the innocent, all in the span of a single myth. Athena grants wisdom and wages war with equal passion. Dionysus brings ecstasy and madness in the same wine-dark cup. This is not moral confusion. This is moral sophistication. The Greeks understand that existence itself is neither purely good nor purely evil, but an endless dance between opposing forces, each necessary, each sacred, each terrible in its own way. North, in the mist-shrouded forests where Celtic druids chant to trees older than memory, the Morrigan appears on battlefields as both crow and woman, death and prophecy intertwined. She does not serve evil. She serves the deeper truth that death feeds life, that endings make beginnings possible, that destruction is creation's shadow twin. To the Celts, she is fearsome, necessary, sacred, never evil. Even further north, where aurora light dances across endless winter, Loki shifts shapes and tells lies and burns the world down, but he also births the horse that carries gods, the wolf that will devour the sun, the serpent that will poison the sky. His mischief is not Satan's rebellion because it serves no cosmic evil. It serves story itself, change itself, the terrible necessity that nothing, not even gods, can remain forever. The Norse know their myths will end in Ragnarok, know their gods will die, know their world will burn. But they do not blame this on a single evil force. They understand that endings are built into beginnings, that even the gods are subject to forces larger than themselves, that chaos and order dance together until the music stops. This is the world before the devil. A world where evil is local, specific, temporary. Where trickster gods and underworld rulers and chaotic forces exist not as cosmic rebels against ultimate good, but as necessary parts of the great machine of existence. Where morality is complicated, where gods can be both blessing and curse, where darkness serves purposes that simple-minded light cannot understand. But something is stirring in the east, in the desert places where new ideas take root like thorns. In Persia, under vast star-scattered skies, a prophet named Zoroaster receives visions that will crack the world in half. He sees existence not as a complex dance, but as a war. Ahura Mazda, the wise lord of light, locked in cosmic battle with Ahriman, the destructive spirit of darkness. For the first time in human history, evil gets a name, a face, a unified will that opposes all good. This is the birth of dualism, the idea that existence is fundamentally divided between forces of light and darkness, good and evil, creation and destruction, the idea that will father the devil himself. The Persian fire temples burn with this new truth, and the light they cast is harsh, unforgiving, absolute. In this light, the old gods begin to look different. Their complexity becomes corruption. Their moral ambiguity becomes evidence of evil influence. The beautiful, terrible chaos that birthed the world becomes the enemy that must be defeated. But Zoroaster's vision requires something the old world never needed, an explanation for why evil exists at all in a creation overseen by a perfectly good God. If Ahura Mazda is all-powerful and all-good, why does Ahriman exist? The answer becomes the foundation of a myth that will outlive empires: rebellion. Ahriman is not simply chaos or natural force or necessary darkness. He is a created being who chose to oppose his creator, who fell from grace through pride, who now seeks to corrupt and destroy all good creation. He is the first draft of Satan, the rough sketch of the devil, the prototype of ultimate evil. This idea spreads like fire through the ancient world, carried by Persian merchants and armies, adapted by Jewish scribes during their Babylonian exile, refined by early Christian theologians desperate to explain suffering in a world created by a loving God. The Jewish texts begin to change. In the older stories, in Job especially, Ha-Satan is not a proper name, but a title, the accuser, the adversary, and he serves God as a kind of divine prosecutor, testing faith, revealing truth, working within the cosmic order. He is Loki's cousin, Eris's brother, Set's distant relative, a necessary irritant that makes growth possible. But by the time Jewish scribes are writing in Babylon, influenced by Persian dualism, Satan begins to solidify into something more sinister. In the Book of Enoch, written around 300 BC, the Watchers, rebellious angels, fall from heaven through lust and pride, teaching forbidden knowledge to humans, corrupting the perfect creation. These fallen angels need a leader, a first rebel, a cosmic Satan to unite their opposition to God. The pieces are coming together. The serpent in Eden, once just a wise talking animal in a folktale about why humans must work and die, begins to be identified with this cosmic rebel. Lucifer, the morning star, the light bearer, mentioned once in Isaiah as a metaphor for a Babylonian king's fall, becomes the name of Satan before his rebellion. The accuser becomes the enemy. The tester becomes the tempter. But this is still not the devil, as Christianity will know him. That figure requires one final element: the pagan gods themselves. Early Christians, spreading through the Roman Empire like wildfire through dry grass, face a problem. The old gods are still there, still worshipped, still powerful in the imagination and daily life of the people they're trying to convert. Zeus still thunders, Apollo still shines, Diana still hunts through sacred groves. These gods are too real, too present, too beloved to simply declare non-existent. So the early church makes a different choice, one that will echo through history like a curse. They declare the pagan gods real, but evil. They are not myths or metaphors or natural forces misunderstood. They are demons, fallen angels, servants of Satan sent to deceive humanity and lead souls to damnation. This is the moment the devil truly comes into being, not as a single fallen angel, but as the king of all the gods the world is losing. Every horned deity, every trickster spirit, every underworld ruler, every force of chaos and change and wild nature becomes part of his army. The rich, complex, morally ambiguous pantheons of the ancient world are flattened into a simple dualistic structure. God and his angels on one side, Satan and his demons on the other. Pan's horns become the devil's horns. Hades' underworld kingdom becomes hell. Set's chaos becomes Satan's rebellion. Loki's shapeshifting becomes demonic deception. The Morrigan's battlefield prophecies become witches' curses. Dionysus's sacred ecstasy becomes sinful possession. The old gods do not disappear. They are recruited into an army they never wanted to join, transformed into servants of an evil they never chose to embody. Their faces, their symbols, their stories become the raw material from which Christianity will construct its ultimate enemy. And in this construction, something is lost that the world will not recover for 1,500 years. The understanding that existence is not a war between absolute good and absolute evil, but a dance between forces too complex for such simple categories. The wisdom that chaos serves order, that destruction enables creation, that darkness is not the enemy of light, but its necessary partner. The ancient world knew gods who were neither purely good nor purely evil, but magnificently, terrifyingly both. The Christian world that replaces it will know only saints and demons, only light and darkness, only salvation and damnation. The devil is born not from evil, but from the death of complexity itself. In the smoky darkness of early Christian churches, as incense rises like prayers made visible, the faithful learn new stories. They learn about a cosmic war between God and Satan, about fallen angels and demonic temptation, about a world divided cleanly between forces of light and darkness. They learn to fear the old gods their grandparents loved, to see evil in the sacred groves and ancient festivals and seasonal celebrations that once brought their communities together. They do not know they are witnessing the greatest theft in human history, the theft of the divine complexity that once helped humans understand that life itself is neither purely good nor purely evil, but endlessly, beautifully, terrifyingly both. The devil is real now, born from the bones of dead gods and the fears of living men. He has Cernunnos' horns and Pan's hooves and Set's chaos and Loki's cunning and Ahriman's cosmic hatred all wrapped into one convenient enemy. One simple explanation for why the world is hard and life is complicated and good people suffer. He is the most successful lie ever told. Not because he is false, but because he is built from truths too dangerous for simple minds to bear. The shadows gather differently now. They gather around a single throne, serve a single will, advance a single cause. The beautiful, terrible complexity of the ancient world has been simplified into something a child can understand. God is good, Satan is evil. Choose your side. But in the deep places, in the forgotten groves and abandoned temples and wild spaces where the old gods once walked, something remembers, something waits, something knows that the devil is not the enemy of the light, but its bastard son, born from the marriage of Persian dualism and Christian conquest, nursed on the blood of dying gods, raised to be the shadow that makes the light seem brighter by comparison. The world before the devil was more honest about darkness. It knew that Set and Hades and the Morrigan and Loki served purposes that simple goodness could not understand. It knew that chaos was not the enemy of order, but its dark twin. That destruction was not the opposite of creation, but its necessary prelude. Now that knowledge sleeps, waiting for brave souls to wake it up again, to remember that the devil's horns once crowned gods of forest and field, that his rebellion was once the creative chaos that births new worlds, that his darkness was once the sacred shadow that gives light its meaning. The ancient world is dead. The devil has won his first victory. But the old gods remember everything, and they are very, very patient. The first Christian missionary to see Pan dancing dies of shock before he can scream. It is a summer night in ancient Arcadia, 150 AD, and the moon hangs heavy as a ripe fruit over olive groves that have known gods since before memory began. The missionary, a Roman convert named Marcus, his Latin prayers still awkward on his tongue, has come to bring light to these backwards hill people who still leave wine and honey for forest spirits. He hides behind an ancient oak, its trunk scarred with offerings older than Rome itself, and watches the festival unfold in the clearing ahead. The bonfire burns so bright it seems to tear a hole in the darkness, and around it move shapes that his Christian mind cannot categorize as anything but demonic. The god appears at midnight. He rises from the earth itself, or seems to, 7 feet of muscle and fur and wild divinity, crowned with curling ram's horns that catch the firelight like polished bone. His face is beautiful and terrible, human above the nose but animal below, lips curved in a smile that knows every secret the forest has whispered since the world began. His legs end, not in feet, but in cloven hooves that strike sparks from stone as he moves to the music of pipes that sound like wind through leaves, like water over rocks, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. This is Pan, the all-god, lord of wild places and wilder desires, and he is everything the missionary has been taught to fear. Around him dance men and women crowned with flowers and ivy, their bodies painted with symbols that predate alphabet, their movements flowing between human grace and animal ecstasy. They couple openly beneath the stars. They drink wine that runs red as blood down their chins. They sing songs in languages that were old when Troy was young. Some wear antlers, some wear nothing at all. Some move on all fours, barking and howling like the wild things they become in the god's presence. The missionary clutches his wooden cross until splinters pierce his palm. This is Babylon, he thinks. This is Sodom. This is every warning the church fathers have given about the pagan world. Every nightmare they have painted of demonic seduction and bestial corruption made flesh and dancing in the firelight. Pan turns toward his hiding place, and their eyes meet across the clearing. The god's smile widens, revealing teeth white as bone, sharp as thorns. He raises one hand in greeting, and flowers bloom instantly in the soil around the missionary's feet, wild roses and night-blooming jasmine and herbs whose names died with the druids who planted them. The scent is overwhelming, intoxicating, a perfume of pure life that makes the missionary's head spin and his body ache with desires he has spent years learning to suppress. Run, his Christian training screams. This is Satan himself, the tempter, the corrupter, the enemy of all righteousness. But the older part of his mind, the part that remembers Roman festivals and childhood stories of woodland gods, whispers something different. This is what divinity looks like when it moves through the world, unashamed. He runs. Back to his small church, back to his Latin prayers and imported incense and careful, civilized worship of a God who died safely on a cross 2,000 miles away. He tells his bishop what he has seen, and the bishop listens with the careful attention of a man cataloguing the enemy's weapons. "You have seen the devil himself," the bishop says, "making the sign of the cross, the horned one, the beast, the corruption of all that is holy and pure." And with those words, Pan begins his transformation from God to demon, from sacred to profane, from the wild divine to Satan's most recognizable face. But this is not the beginning of the horned God story. This is the middle. The moment when one world's sacred becomes another world's evil, when symbols of life and fertility and the raw creative force of nature become signs of damnation and corruption. To understand how Pan becomes the devil, we must travel deeper into the past, into the caves where humanity first learned to see gods in the darkness. Çatalhöyük, 7000 BC. In what will one day be Turkey, the world's first city rises from the Anatolian plain, like a prayer made of mud brick and hope. In the shrine rooms, painted on walls that will outlast empires, horned figures dance with their arms raised in blessing or ecstasy or both. Bullhorns crown human heads. Stag antlers sprout from divine brows. The sacred and the animal merge in images that pulse with life, even 9,000 years later. These are not demons. These are gods of abundance, of fertility, of the wild creative force that makes grain grow and cattle multiply and women birth healthy children. The horns are not symbols of evil, but of power. The power of the bull that breaks the earth for planting. The power of the stag that renews himself each season. The power of the ram that leads the flock to safety. In Lascaux, in Altamira, in caves across Europe where Ice Age artists painted their dreams on stone, the horned god appears again and again. Sometimes human, sometimes animal, sometimes something beautifully between. The sorcerer of Trois Frères stares down through 20,000 years with antlered head and human eyes. Master of the hunt, lord of the beasts, the first god humanity ever drew. He is not evil. He is not Satan. He is the divine made manifest in the only way our ancestors could understand it, as the force that animates all living things, that drives the deer to run and the rivers to flow and the seeds to crack open in dark earth and reach for light. The Celts know him as Cernunnos, the Horned One, lord of animals and forests, and the wild places where civilization fears to tread. On the Gundestrup cauldron, that masterpiece of Celtic art hammered from silver sometime around 100 BC, he sits cross-legged in perfect meditation, antlers spreading like a forest canopy above his head, talk of kingship around his throat, serpent coiling in his hand like wisdom made visible. He is surrounded by all the animals of earth and sky and water, stags and boars and dolphins and birds, not as their destroyer, but as their sovereign, their protector, their divine embodiment. He is what humans might become if they remembered they were animals, what animals might become if they remembered they were divine. To the Celts, he is the force that makes sap rise in spring, that drives animals to mate, that fills hunters with the savage joy of the chase, and farmers with the patient wisdom of the seasons. He is dangerous. Yes, all true gods are dangerous. But he is not evil. He is life itself, in all its wild, untamed, irrepressible glory. The Greeks call him Pan, and they understand him as the god of shepherds and wild places, of music and madness, of the panic that strikes armies and the ecstasy that strikes lovers. His pipes can drive men insane or heal the deepest wounds. His presence can terrify or inspire. He is the God of contradictions, of the space between civilization and wilderness where true magic lives. In Rome, they worship him as Faunus, the woodland god whose festivals bring the city to fever pitch with wine and sex and holy madness. The Lupercalia, held each February, sees priests dressed in goatskins running naked through the streets, striking women with bloody strips of hide to grant fertility. It is ancient, primal, exactly the kind of ritual that makes Christians recoil in horror. But it is not evil. It is the recognition that humans are animals, that sex is sacred, that the wild force of life cannot be contained in churches and prayers and careful morality. It is the celebration of the truth that civilization tries to forget. We are not separate from nature, but part of it. Not above the beasts, but related to them. Not pure spirits trapped in corrupt flesh, but glorious animals blessed with divine consciousness. Then the Christians come, and everything changes. They see the horns and think of devils. They see the nakedness and think of sin. They see the ecstasy and think of possession. They see the ancient festivals and think of witches' Sabbaths. They see the wild god and think of Satan himself. This is not accident. This is strategy. The early church understands something the modern world has forgotten. You cannot simply tell people to stop worshipping their gods. The gods are too real, too present, too woven into the fabric of daily life. The festivals that honor them mark the seasons, bring communities together, provide the rhythm by which agricultural societies live and die. So the church does something more subtle, more devastating. They transform the gods into demons, the sacred into the profane, the divine into the diabolical. Pan's horns become Satan's horns. His hooves become the devil's hooves. His pipes become the instruments of demonic seduction. His wild sexuality becomes sinful lust. His sacred madness becomes diabolic possession. His forests become haunted places where demons dwell and witches gather to work evil magic. The transformation is systematic, thorough, merciless. Dionysus, the Greek god of wine and ecstasy, becomes a demon of drunkenness and debauchery. His followers' sacred orgies become diabolic sex rituals. His holy madness becomes demonic possession. His promise of liberation becomes satanic temptation. The Green Man, that ancient figure of foliate divinity whose face appears in forests across Europe, becomes a demon hiding in the trees. His connection to growing things becomes evidence of evil magic. His seasonal death and rebirth becomes proof of pagan corruption. The churches will carve his face into their stones, but only to show his defeat, his subjugation to Christian power. Silvanus, the Roman forest god. Sylvester, the wild man of the woods. The Woedwoes, the hairy giant of Germanic folklore. Puck, the English shapeshifter. Robin Goodfellow, the trickster sprite. One by one, they are recruited into Satan's army, their ancient benevolence rewritten as malevolence, their gifts redefined as curses, their wild wisdom dismissed as demonic deception. The process takes centuries, but it is relentless as erosion, patient as stone. Where once local spirits blessed crops and protected herds, now demons lurk to curse and destroy. Where once gods of field and forest received offerings and prayers, now evil entities tempt the faithful from the path of righteousness. The sacred groves are cut down. The ancient festivals are banned or transformed beyond recognition. The old songs are forgotten or deliberately destroyed. The priestesses who knew the forest's secrets are hunted as witches. The wise women who could speak to spirits are burned as diabolic servants. And at the center of this great transformation stands the figure who will become the most recognizable image of evil the world has ever known. The horned, hooved, goat-legged devil who is Pan in Christian drag. Cernunnos, wearing the mask of corruption, the wild god transformed into the ultimate enemy. But the transformation is never quite complete. In the deep woods, where churches are few and memory is long, people still leave milk for house spirits and bread for forest dwellers. They still dance around bonfires on the old feast days, though they call them Christian festivals now. They still tell stories of the horned god, though they call him the devil and cross themselves when they speak his name. In England, the wild hunt still rides across stormy skies, led by Herne the Hunter with his great antlered crown. But now he is said to be damned, cursed to lead the souls of the unbaptized until the world's end. In Germany, they still speak of the Wilde Jagd, the ghost hunt that thunders through winter nights. But now it is Satan himself who leads it, gathering the souls of the wicked for eternal punishment. In France, the Danse Macabre still draws people into the forest for nights of wild celebration. But now it is said to be a gathering of witches, a diabolic Sabbath where demons take human form and seduce the faithful into damnation. The old gods survive, but only as shadows of themselves, only as enemies of the new order, only as proof of Christianity's triumph over the forces of darkness. This is perhaps the most successful propaganda campaign in human history, the transformation of the sacred into the profane, the divine into the diabolical, the gods of life and fertility and wild nature into servants of ultimate evil. Pan's pipes still echo through European folklore, but now they play diabolic music that drives listeners insane. His horns still crown the lord of wild places, but now those places are haunted by demons rather than blessed by gods. His hooves still strike sparks from stone, but now they mark the devil's passage rather than a god's dance. In the medieval mind, the transformation is complete. The horned god is Satan. The wild places are diabolic. The old festivals are witches' Sabbaths. Nature itself becomes suspect, tainted by association with the pre-Christian past. But something essential is lost in this transformation, something the modern world is only beginning to rediscover. The understanding that wildness is not evil, that sexuality is not sin, that the untamed forces of nature are not diabolic corruption, but divine creativity in its rawest, most honest form. Pan was never the devil. Pan was the god of everything Christianity feared: the wild, the sexual, the uncontrolled, the natural, the joyous, the ecstatic, the free. He was the reminder that humans are animals, that animals are divine, that the flesh is not the enemy of the spirit, but its most glorious expression. To transform him into Satan, Christianity had to transform wildness into evil, sexuality into sin, nature into corruption. They had to teach people to fear their own bodies, to despise their animal nature, to see the forest as haunted rather than sacred, to hear demons in the wind rather than gods. This is the theft at the heart of the devil's origin story, not just the theft of pagan gods, but the theft of humanity's connection to the wild divine, to the sacred sexuality, to the holy madness that once let people become gods for a night around the sacred fires. The horned god dances still, in the deep places where memory runs deeper than doctrine, but now he dances alone, in forests empty of worshippers, to music only the wind remembers. His horns still crown him as lord of wild places, but those places shrink each year, pushed back by cities and churches and the advancing armies of civilization. He waits in the shadows, cast by stained glass windows, in the silence between hymns, in the dreams of people who have forgotten how to be wild. He remembers when his horns were not signs of evil, but crowns of divinity, when his hooves did not mark diabolic passage but divine dance, when his pipes played not satanic seduction, but the music of pure joy. Pan is not dead. Gods do not die. They merely sleep, waiting for brave souls to remember their true names, to hear their real music, to dance their ancient dances again. But for now, the wild god wears the devil's mask, and the world has forgotten the difference between sacred wildness and profane evil. The horns that once blessed now curse. The hooves that once danced now destroy. The pipes that once healed now harm. This is Christianity's greatest magic trick, making the divine disappear by calling it diabolic. And in the empty places where gods once danced, only the devil remains. The serpent in the garden speaks with a voice like honey over broken glass. She coils around the tree of knowledge, her scales catching the dappled sunlight that filters through leaves heavy with forbidden fruit. This is not yet the Eden of Christian imagination, not yet the scene of humanity's great betrayal, but something older, stranger, more beautiful and terrible than Paradise Lost. This is the moment before the fall becomes a fall, before the serpent becomes Satan, before the Lightbringer becomes the Lord of Darkness. This is the moment when wisdom wears reptilian skin and divinity speaks through forked tongue, when the most dangerous truths come wrapped in the most seductive forms. The woman reaches for the fruit, and in that reaching, she reaches across millennia of mythology to grasp symbols that belong to other gods, other stories, other truths, before they were conscripted into the army of Christian allegory. The serpent who tempts her is not yet the devil. Not yet. But she will be. Travel back. Before Eden was dreamed. Before Adam drew his first breath. Before God walked in the cool of the evening. Through gardens that existed only in the fevered imagination of Hebrew scribes, trying to explain why the world is broken. In ancient Sumer, the serpent goddess Ningish-Zida rises from the underworld with healing in her coils, her body marked with the sacred patterns that will one day adorn the caduceus of Hermes, the staff of healing that modern medicine still claims as its symbol. She brings not temptation, but wisdom, not corruption, but renewal, not death, but the promise of rebirth that comes only to those brave enough to shed their skin. Her priests understand the secret, that the serpent's gift is transformation itself, the terrible and necessary ability to die to what you were and be born as what you might become. The snake who devours her own tail becomes the Ouroboros, the eternal cycle of creation and destruction, the reminder that endings are always beginnings in disguise. In Egypt, the cobra goddess Wadjet spreads her hood above the pharaoh's brow, protecting divine authority with her poisonous blessing. She is the Uraeus, the sacred serpent whose bite brings death to enemies and divine power to kings. She guards the secrets of life and death, of healing and harming, of the thin line between medicine and poison that only the wise know how to walk. The Egyptian priests carve her image into temple walls and tomb paintings, knowing that the serpent's wisdom is the wisdom of cycles, of the Nile's flood and recession, of the sun's daily death and rebirth, of the soul's journey through the underworld and back to light. She is not evil, but essential, not corrupt, but sacred, not Satan, but the divine teacher who initiates the difference between knowledge and wisdom. In Greece, the python of Delphi coils around the sacred stone where Apollo's oracle breathes prophetic vapors and speaks the words of gods. This serpent is not the enemy of divine truth, but its guardian, not the corrupter of revelation, but its protector. To reach the oracle, pilgrims must pass by the python's lair, must face the serpent wisdom that guards all genuine knowledge. The Greeks understand what later ages will forget, that true wisdom is dangerous, that real knowledge changes those who receive it, that the path to divine truth always leads through serpentine coils that seem threatening only to those who fear transformation. Python is eventually slain by Apollo, but even in death, the serpent's wisdom becomes part of the god's power. The oracle speaks with Python's voice, breathes Python's breath, channels Python's ancient knowledge of Earth's hidden truths. The serpent does not disappear. It becomes part of the divine machinery by which gods speak to mortals. In India, Kundalini coils at the base of the spine like a sleeping goddess, waiting for the brave soul who will wake her with breath and meditation, and the disciplines that transform human consciousness into divine awareness. She is the serpent power that rises through the chakras, burning away illusion, destroying false identity, lifting consciousness from animal awareness to cosmic understanding. Her gift is terrible, to die as separate self and be reborn as universal spirit. Her price is everything, every attachment, every comfort, every lie the ego tells itself about its own importance. But her reward is worth any cost. The direct experience of divinity, the knowledge that self and cosmos are one sacred fire, dancing in infinite forms. The Hindu sages know that Kundalini is not demon, but divine teacher, not tempter, but transformer, not Satan, but Shakti, the creative power of the universe itself awakening within human form. To fear the serpent power is to fear God. To reject transformation is to choose spiritual death. To call Kundalini evil is to call existence itself corrupt. Across the world, in cultures that never heard of Eden or Adam, or the fruit of forbidden trees, the serpent appears again and again as symbol of wisdom, healing, renewal, divine knowledge. The rainbow serpent of Australian Aboriginal tradition, the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl of Mesoamerica, the world serpent Jormungandr of Norse mythology, whose coils encircle the earth and whose movements shake the foundations of reality. None of them are evil. All of them are dangerous. Dangerous the way divine truth is always dangerous. Dangerous the way real wisdom is always dangerous. Dangerous the way transformation is always dangerous, because it requires the death of what we think we are, so we can become what we really are. But something changes when Hebrew scribes, influenced by Persian dualism and traumatized by Babylonian exile, begin to weave older mythologies into new narratives designed to explain why the world is broken and who is to blame. The story they tell is simple, powerful, devastating. God creates a perfect world, places the first humans in a perfect garden, gives them one simple rule to follow. A serpent, not a goddess, not a teacher, not a symbol of divine wisdom, but a creature of field and forest, convinces the woman to break that rule. Death enters the world, paradise is lost, humanity is condemned to suffering and exile. It is a masterpiece of mythological engineering, this Genesis account. It takes the ancient symbols of transformation and wisdom and recasts them as temptation and corruption. It transforms the serpent from divine teacher to demonic deceiver, from sacred guide to satanic tempter, from the keeper of wisdom to the enemy of truth. But the story requires something more to become the foundation of Christian demonology. It requires identity for the serpent, a name for the nameless tempter, a personality for the creature that destroys paradise. The name comes from an unlikely source, a prophetic poem written sometime around 700 BC by the Hebrew prophet Isaiah, aimed not at cosmic evil, but at a very earthly target, the king of Babylon, who has conquered Israel and dragged its people into exile. How you have fallen from heaven, morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who once laid low the nations. The Hebrew word is Hellel, shining one, light bearer, the name given to the planet Venus in its role as morning star, herald of the dawn. In Latin, this becomes Lucifer, literally lightbringer, a title of beauty and glory, not evil and corruption. Isaiah is not describing Satan's fall from heaven. He is describing a human king's fall from power, using the ancient myth of the day star's defeat by the rising sun as metaphor for political destruction. The morning star rises before dawn, blazes with borrowed light, thinks itself the equal of the sun, then is extinguished when true daylight comes. So too, the king of Babylon, mighty for a moment, then cast down by the true king of heaven. It is poetry, not theology, metaphor, not literal description of cosmic rebellion. But later readers, especially early Christian theologians desperate to understand the origin of evil in a world created by a perfectly good God, see something different in Isaiah's words. They see not political satire, but cosmic history, not metaphorical description, but literal account of Satan's rebellion and fall. The morning star becomes the fallen angel. The light-bringer becomes the prince of darkness. Lucifer becomes Satan's name before his corruption, the title of the angel who was most beautiful, most powerful, most beloved of God, until pride corrupted him and rebellion cast him down. The story grows in the telling. Jewish apocalyptic literature, written during the centuries between the Old and New Testaments, elaborates the tale with details that will become central to Christian demonology. The Book of Enoch, written around 300 BC, tells of the Watchers, angels assigned to watch over humanity, who instead fall in love with human women, teach forbidden knowledge, and corrupt the perfect creation with their hybrid offspring. These fallen angels need a leader, and Lucifer fits the role perfectly. The light-bringer becomes the first rebel. The morning star becomes the prince of fallen angels. The son of dawn becomes the father of darkness. But the transformation is not yet complete. Lucifer and the serpent remain separate figures in most early Christian thinking. The fallen angel who rebelled in heaven, the talking animal who tempted Eve in Eden. It takes centuries of theological development to weave them together into the unified figure of Satan that will dominate medieval imagination. The weaving happens slowly, inevitably, as Christian theologians face the question that has haunted dualistic religions since Zoroaster first divided existence between light and darkness. If God is all-powerful and all-good, why does evil exist at all? The answer requires a story of rebellion, of created beings choosing to oppose their creator, of the corruption of perfect creation by free will gone wrong. And that story requires main characters. The serpent who corrupts paradise, the angel who rebels against heaven, the force that opposes God's will and seeks to destroy God's creation. Lucifer becomes that force. The serpent becomes his manifestation. The light-bringer becomes the Lord of darkness. The morning star becomes the evening star, herald not of dawn, but of dusk, bringer not of illumination, but of blindness. The identification is complete by the time medieval Christians carve their vision of cosmic history into cathedral stone and stained glass windows. Lucifer and the serpent are one being. Satan and the tempter are the same entity. The fallen angel and the Eden deceiver are unified in the person of the devil himself. But in this unification, something profound is lost. The understanding that light and darkness are partners in the cosmic dance, that knowledge and innocence cannot coexist, that transformation always requires the destruction of what came before. The morning star's fall is not corruption, but necessity. Venus rises before dawn precisely because someone must herald the light, must prepare the way for solar glory, must burn with borrowed fire until the true fire comes. The morning star falls not from pride but from love. Love of the light it serves, love of the dawn it announces, love of the transformation it makes possible. So too the serpent's gift in Eden. The fruit of knowledge is not poison but medicine, bitter medicine that destroys innocence but grants consciousness, that ends paradise but begins human history, that brings death into the world, but also brings the possibility of meaning. The serpent does not lie when she tells Eve that eating the fruit will make her like God, knowing good and evil. This is exactly what happens. Humanity gains the divine gift of moral consciousness, the terrible and wonderful ability to choose between right and wrong, the burden and blessing of ethical responsibility. But this gift comes at a price: the end of innocence, the beginning of suffering, the loss of paradise. The serpent wisdom teaches what all true wisdom teaches: that growth requires the destruction of what we were. That knowledge comes only to those brave enough to abandon ignorance, that consciousness is born from the death of unconsciousness. This is why the serpent has been sacred in so many traditions, why the Lightbringer has been honored in so many mythologies, why the morning star has been worshipped as herald of divine illumination. They represent the principle of transformation itself, the necessary destruction that precedes new creation, the death that gives birth to life. But Christianity, influenced by Persian dualism and terrified by the complexity of existence, cannot bear this paradox. It needs clear categories: good and evil, light and darkness, God and Satan. It cannot allow that the serpent might be both tempter and teacher, that Lucifer might be both rebel and herald, that the fall might be both catastrophe and necessity. So the ancient symbols of transformation are recast as symbols of corruption. The Lightbringer becomes the Lord of Darkness. The serpent wisdom becomes satanic deception. The morning star becomes the evening star, herald not of dawn, but of eternal night. The price of this transformation is the loss of the serpent's real gift. The understanding that consciousness comes only to those brave enough to bite the apple, that wisdom belongs only to those willing to risk innocence, that divine knowledge is always forbidden knowledge because it transforms those who receive it. Lucifer and the serpent were never Satan. They were symbols of the dangerous divine, teachers of the terrible truth that growth requires loss, that light emerges from darkness, that wisdom comes only to those brave enough to face the dragons that guard it. But in becoming Satan, they become something simpler and safer, the enemy to be defeated rather than the teacher to be honored, the corruption to be avoided rather than the transformation to be embraced, the darkness to be fled rather than the shadow that gives light its meaning. The morning star still rises before dawn, but now it rises as Satan, herald not of divine illumination, but of diabolic deception. The serpent still coils around the tree of knowledge, but now it coils as the enemy of truth rather than its guardian, the destroyer of wisdom rather than its keeper. In the deep places where memory runs deeper than doctrine, the old truths survive. Healers still honor the caduceus with its intertwined serpents. Mystics still seek the Kundalini fire that burns away illusion. Astronomers still watch Venus rise in morning glory, setting in evening beauty, dying and being reborn in cycles that connect Earth to cosmos. But in the churches and cathedrals where Christian civilization shapes human imagination, Lucifer has become Satan, the serpent has become the devil, the Lightbringer has become the Lord of Lies. The symbols of transformation have been transformed into symbols of corruption. The teachers of dangerous wisdom have been recast as enemies of safe truth. The heralds of divine illumination have been made servants of eternal darkness. This is the second great theft in the devil's origin story. Not just the theft of pagan gods, but the theft of the very symbols that taught humanity how to grow, how to change, how to die to what they were, and be born as what they might become. Lucifer was never the enemy of light. Lucifer was light's herald, dawn's announcer, the morning star that blazes with reflected glory until the true sun rises and makes such reflection unnecessary. The serpent was never the enemy of wisdom. The serpent was wisdom's keeper, transformation's teacher, the guardian of the knowledge that consciousness comes only to those brave enough to leave unconsciousness behind. But now they wear the devil's face, and the world has forgotten that fall and rise are part of the same dance, that corruption and purification are phases of the same cycle, that Satan and Lucifer were never the same being until theology made them so. The Lightbringer burns still, but now it burns as hellfire rather than divine illumination. The serpent teaches still, but now it teaches corruption rather than transformation. And in the space between what they were and what they have become, the devil completes another step in his long journey from non-existence to ultimate reality. The morning star has fallen. The serpent has been cursed. Paradise has been lost. But the real tragedy is not the fall itself. It is the forgetting that every fall is also a rising, every ending also a beginning, every death also a birth. Lucifer will rise again, the serpent will shed her skin, the morning star will herald another dawn. But first, the world must learn to tell the difference between the teacher and the tempter, between the light bringer and the lord of lies, between the wisdom that transforms and the deception that destroys. The fruit still hangs on the tree. The choice is still ours to make. The serpent waits, coiled around the roots of knowledge, her voice like honey over broken glass. You will not surely die. You will be like God, knowing good and evil. She has never lied. She never will. The question is whether we are brave enough to believe her. The temple of Baal burns against the night sky, like a star falling to earth. It is 391 AD, and Emperor Theodosius has made his choice. No more tolerance, no more accommodation, no more careful balance between the old gods and the new. The edict crackles through the empire like lightning. All pagan temples must close, all pagan sacrifices must cease, all pagan festivals must end. The old gods are not merely forbidden, they are declared diabolic, demonic, servants of Satan himself. In Alexandria, Christian mobs storm the Serapeum, that wonder of the ancient world where the god Serapis once received offerings from philosophers and farmers alike. They smash his statue with hammers blessed by bishops, burn his sacred texts in bonfires fed by holy oil, transform his temple into a church where they will pray to a carpenter's son who died on a Roman cross. But something strange happens as the statue crumbles. The marble face, carved by artists who knew how to capture divinity in stone, does not disappear. Instead, it transforms. The noble features twist into something monstrous. The wise eyes become malevolent. The peaceful expression warps into a snarl of cosmic hatred. Serapis is not dying. Serapis is becoming something else. Something that will serve the new order by embodying everything the new order claims to fight against. The god of wisdom and healing and agricultural abundance is being reborn as a demon of deception and corruption and diabolic seduction. This is not destruction. This is recruitment. Watch the transformation spread like plague across the dying empire. In Gaul, Tyrannus the thunder god becomes a demon of storm and destruction. In Britain, Lugh of the long arm becomes a spirit of diabolic craftsmanship. In Germania, Wotan the All-Father becomes a leader of the wild hunt, gathering souls for hell instead of Valhalla. The gods do not disappear. They are conscripted into an army they never chose to join, transformed into servants of an evil they never chose to embody, made to wear Satan's livery while retaining just enough of their original power to be dangerous. This is perhaps the most successful military campaign in human history. The conquest not of lands or peoples, but of divinity itself. The transformation of an entire pantheon, from sacred to profane, from divine to diabolic, from gods to demons, with nothing more than imperial decree and theological sleight of hand. But to understand how this conquest succeeds, we must witness its beginning, not in the throne rooms of emperors, but in the missionary territories where Christianity first encounters the gods it will ultimately destroy. Syria, 150 AD. A Christian evangelist named Marcus stands before a crowd of farmers and merchants in the marketplace of a small city whose name history will forget. Behind him rises a temple to Baal-Hadad, lord of storm and fertility, whose priests have served this community for over 1,000 years. Marcus speaks of Jesus, of salvation, of eternal life through faith in the risen Christ. But his message faces a problem. Baal-Hadad is real to these people, present in their daily lives, responsive to their prayers. When they need rain for their crops, they sacrifice to the storm lord. When they need protection from raiders, they call on the god of thunder. When their women struggle in childbirth, They invoke the Lord of Fertility. How do you convince people to abandon gods who actually answer prayers? Marcus finds his answer not in philosophy, but in demonology. He does not tell the crowd that Baal-Hadad is imaginary, a figment of superstition, a creation of ignorant minds. Instead, he tells them something far more compelling and terrifying. Baal-Hadad is real, but he is not a god. He is a demon, a fallen angel, a servant of Satan sent to deceive humanity and lead souls to damnation. The rain that comes when they sacrifice to Baal-Hadad, demonic magic designed to make them dependent on diabolic power. The protection from enemies, temporary aid that costs them their eternal souls. The fertility that blesses their marriages, corruption that binds them to infernal forces. The crowd listens with growing horror as Marcus weaves a new mythology from the threads of the old. Every blessing becomes a curse. Every answer to prayer becomes evidence of deception. Every divine intervention becomes proof of diabolic manipulation. But Marcus goes further. He gives the people a new name for their ancient god, one that will echo through Christian demonology for the next 2,000 years. Beelzebub, Lord of Flies, Prince of Demons, Satan's own lieutenant in the war against righteousness. The transformation is elegant in its simplicity. Baal-Zebul, Baal the Prince, an ancient title of honor, becomes Baal-Zebub, Lord of Flies, a name that turns divinity into filth, majesty into corruption, the Stormlord into a buzzing pest that feeds on decay. The crowd begins to murmur, then to pray, then to weep for their own corruption. How long have they served demons without knowing? How many of their ancestors burn in hell for worshipping devils? How can they purify themselves from generations of diabolic contamination? Marcus has his converts. Baal-Hadad has become Beelzebub. The god has become a demon. The transformation is complete. But this is only the beginning. Across the Mediterranean, the same scene plays out with different names, different gods, different demons, but always the same strategy. The gods are not denied but demonized, not dismissed but recruited into Satan's army, not destroyed but transformed into their own opposites. In Mesopotamia, Ishtar, the goddess of love and war, becomes Astaroth, a male demon of seduction and violence. Her sacred sexuality becomes demonic temptation. Her divine warfare becomes infernal destruction. Her role as Queen of Heaven becomes a position in Hell's hierarchy. The transformation is not accidental. Early Christian theologians need demons for their cosmic drama, need servants for their Satan, need an army of evil to oppose the armies of heaven. The pagan gods provide raw material for this diabolic host, ready-made supernatural beings with established mythologies, existing temples, devoted followers. All that remains is to flip the moral balance. Gods become demons, sacred becomes profane, divine becomes diabolic. The process accelerates as Christianity gains imperial backing. Constantine's Edict of Milan in 313 AD grants religious tolerance, but tolerance is not the goal. Conversion is. The empire begins the careful work of transforming pagan festival sites into Christian holy places, pagan gods into Christian demons, pagan rituals into diabolic practices. At Dodona, where Zeus's oracle once spoke through the rustling of sacred oak leaves, Christian authorities build a church and declare the place haunted by demons who whisper lies to the credulous. The oak is cut down, its wood burned in fires blessed by bishops who call the smoke the last breath of diabolic deception. At Delphi, where Apollo's Pythia once breathed sacred vapors and spoke prophetic truth, the temple is closed and the oracle silenced. But the site is not abandoned, it is reinterpreted. The vapors that once carried divine inspiration are now declared demonic exhalations. The prophecies that once guided kings and philosophers are now dismissed as diabolic lies wrapped in poetic language. The gods themselves are subjected to systematic character assassination. Zeus, the Skyfather, becomes a demon of pride and sexual corruption. His many love affairs reinterpreted as evidence of demonic seduction, his kingly authority recast as satanic rebellion against the true God. Aphrodite, the goddess of love, becomes a demon of lust and prostitution. Her sacred sexuality transformed into infernal corruption. Her divine beauty made into diabolic temptation. Apollo, the god of music and prophecy, becomes a demon of false inspiration. His lyre becomes Satan's instrument. His poetry becomes diabolic deception. His healing becomes temporary magic that costs souls their salvation. Artemis the huntress becomes a demon of wild violence. Her sacred groves become diabolic gathering places. Her virgin huntresses become witches who serve Satan in the deep woods. One by one, the gods of Olympus are drafted into hell's legions. Their temples become diabolic strongholds. Their priests become Satan's servants. Their festivals become witches' Sabbaths. Their sacred sites become portals to hell itself. But the process is not limited to the classical gods. Across Europe, local deities face the same systematic demonization. In Ireland, the Tuatha De Danann, the tribe of the goddess Danu, the gods who ruled before mortal kings, become the Sidhe, fairy folk who steal children and lead travelers astray. Their sacred mounds become diabolic dwelling places. Their otherworldly beauty becomes demonic glamour. Their gifts become cursed bargains that damn those who accept them. In Wales, Cernunnos the horned god becomes Gwyneb Nud, lord of the diabolic hunt that rides through winter storms gathering souls for hell. His antlered crown becomes Satan's horns. His role as psychopomp becomes the devil's work of harvesting the damned. In Scandinavia, the Aesir face wholesale demonization as Christianity spreads north. Odin, the All-Father, becomes a one-eyed demon who rides the wild hunt, gathering the souls of unbaptized dead. Thor, the thunder god, becomes a diabolic figure whose hammer strikes down the faithful. Freya, the fertility goddess, becomes a demon of sexual corruption who leads the witches' Sabbath. The process is so thorough, so systematic, so complete, that within a few centuries, the gods who once ruled human imagination become the demons who populate human nightmares. Their names survive, but twisted into new forms. Their powers remain, but reinterpreted as diabolic rather than divine. Their stories continue, but as cautionary tales about the dangers of serving Satan, rather than celebratory myths about the glory of the gods. This transformation serves multiple purposes for the expanding Christian empire. First, it explains why the old religions had power. Not because the gods were real, but because demons are real, and demons can mimic divine power to deceive the faithful. Second, it provides a ready-made demonology for Christian theology, a hierarchy of evil beings with established names, powers, and mythologies. Third, it makes conversion emotionally compelling by transforming religious change from loss to salvation. People are not abandoning their gods, but escaping from demons who have been deceiving them all along. The strategy is so successful that it becomes the template for Christian expansion across the globe. In the Americas, Aztec and Mayan gods become demons. In Africa, tribal deities become diabolic spirits. In Asia, Hindu and Buddhist figures become servants of Satan. Wherever Christianity spreads, the local gods are not destroyed but recruited, transformed from divine protectors into diabolic enemies, from sacred teachers into satanic deceivers. But perhaps the most elegant aspect of this transformation is how it preserves the very power it claims to reject. The gods become demons retain their essential characteristics, their fundamental abilities, their core mythologies. They simply serve new masters and pursue opposite goals. Baal Hadad's power over storms does not disappear when he becomes Beelzebub. It is simply reinterpreted as diabolic rather than divine. Ishtar's control over love and war does not vanish when she becomes Astaroth. It is simply understood as demonic rather than sacred. The Celtic gods' ability to move between worlds does not end when they become fairy folk. It is simply feared, rather than revered. This preservation is crucial because it allows Christianity to have its theological cake and eat it too. The Church can claim that the old gods were never real while simultaneously insisting that they remain dangerous, can declare pagan religions false, while warning that pagan practices still carry supernatural power, can dismiss ancient mythologies as superstition while maintaining that ancient rituals can still summon diabolic forces. The result is a world where the gods live on as demons, where divine power persists as diabolic corruption, where sacred sites remain supernaturally charged but with their polarity reversed from positive to negative, from holy to haunted, from blessed to cursed. Nowhere is this more visible than in the landscape itself. Across Europe, mountains, springs, groves, and stone circles that were once sacred to the old gods become devil's places in Christian geography. The Devil's Bridge, Devil's Glen, Devil's Tower, Devil's Hollow. Thousands of place names that preserve the memory of ancient sanctity while transforming it into modern menace. These are not random renamings, but systematic theological archaeology. Every Devil's Bridge was once a sacred crossing place where river gods received offerings. Every Devil's Glen was once a sacred grove where forest deities dwelt. Every Devil's Tower was once a sacred mountain where sky gods touched earth. The names preserve the power while reversing the polarity. The sites remain supernatural, but their supernatural character is now understood as diabolic rather than divine, as cursed rather than blessed, as places to avoid rather than places to seek. This is the final genius of the Christian conquest of paganism. It does not destroy the sacred geography, but baptizes it in reverse, not with holy water, but with diabolic designation. The gods' dwelling places become Satan's strongholds. The deities' sacred sites become the devil's territory. The ancient places of power become modern places of fear. But memory runs deeper than theology, and in the deep places of human consciousness, the gods remember who they really are. In folk tales and local legends, in customs that survive despite official disapproval, in dreams and visions that rise from layers of mind older than Christianity, the ancient deities persist. They survive, but in disguise. Odin becomes the wild huntsman who rides through winter storms. Dangerous, yes, but also magnificent. The Celtic otherworld becomes fairyland. Perilous, certainly, but also beautiful beyond human imagination. The goddess becomes the witch, feared undoubtedly, but also wise in ways the Church cannot fathom. Even in their demonized forms, the gods retain something of their original grandeur, their essential power, their fundamental truth. Beelzebub may be Lord of Flies, but he is still Lord of something. Astaroth may be a demon, but she is still a queen. The fairy folk may be diabolic, but they are still magical. This is why the demonization of the gods is never quite complete, never entirely successful. You can change the names, alter the stories, reverse the moral judgments, but you cannot destroy the essential recognition that these figures represent powers larger than human comprehension, forces deeper than human control, truths older than human civilization. The gods become demons, retain their appeal because they retain their reality. They are still the forces that make storms and bring fertility and inspire poetry and guide the dead to their rest. They are still the powers that humans encountered in wild places, in moments of ecstasy, in experiences of the sacred that transcended ordinary reality. Christianity can call them demons, but it cannot make them less than what they are. The divine powers that shaped human consciousness long before Christ was born, that will continue to shape human experience long after the last church crumbles to dust. In the deep woods where memory runs deeper than doctrine, in the old customs that survive despite official disapproval, in the dreams that rise from levels of mind older than theology, the gods wait. They wear diabolic masks now, speak through diabolic mouths, manifest in diabolic forms, but beneath the masks, behind the distortions, through the theological overlays, they remain what they always were, the sacred powers that make existence possible, the divine forces that animate the world, the gods who remember when they were gods, and wait for humans to remember too. The war on the old gods has been won, but the victory is hollow. You cannot kill divinity with theology, cannot destroy the sacred with doctrine, cannot make gods into demons without making demons into something dangerously close to gods. Beelzebub still commands the storms. Astaroth still rules love and war. The fairy folk still move between worlds. The wild hunt still rides through winter nights. They serve Satan now, according to Christian mythology. But in the deep places where truth lives longer than doctrine, they serve something older, something truer, something that was sacred long before it became diabolic, and will be sacred long after diabolic becomes sacred again. The old gods are dead. Long live the old gods. Even hell cannot contain them forever. The old woman's hands shake as she gathers herbs in the pale light before dawn. Her name is Margot, and she has done this every morning for 40 years, walking the boundaries between field and forest, between the tamed world and the wild one, collecting the plants that heal fevers and ease childbirth and help the crops grow strong. Her grandmother taught her which leaves to pick when the moon is dark, which roots to harvest when the sun stands still, which flowers hold the most power when gathered with dew still clinging to their petals. She does not know that she is about to become a witch. She does not know that the knowledge passed down through generations of wise women, the knowledge of herb and stone, of moon phase and star position, of the old songs that call rain and the old dances that ensure fertility, is about to be declared diabolic. She does not know that her healing hands will be called Satan's instruments, that her midwife's wisdom will be labeled demonic corruption, that her connection to the ancient rhythms of earth and sky will be seen as evidence of a pact with the devil himself. But the Inquisitors know. They have been watching her, cataloguing her crimes against Christian orthodoxy, building their case with the careful precision of men who understand that the war against the old gods requires the destruction of those who still serve them, whether they know it or not. They come for her at midnight, of course. Darkness is the devil's hour, and they want the symbolism to be perfect. Margot wakes to the sound of hooves on cobblestone, the flicker of torches through her window, the voices of men who speak Latin prayers like weapons against the dark. She has time for one prayer to the old goddess who watches over wise women, one quick touch of the iron nail she keeps for protection, one deep breath of the herb-scented air that has been her sanctuary for 63 years. Then the door splinters, and the new world crashes into the old one with the finality of Judgment Day. Margot de la Mer, the Inquisitor's voice cuts through the darkness like a blade blessed in holy water. You stand accused of witchcraft, of congress with demons, of making a pact with Satan himself to work evil magic in this Christian community. She stares at them, these men in their black robes, these servants of a God who died on a cross 2,000 miles away and 1,500 years ago, and wonders how healing the sick became evil, how helping birth became diabolic, how knowing the old ways became a crime against heaven itself. But she knows the answer, even if she cannot speak it. She knows because she is old enough to remember when the wise women were respected, when the midwives were honored, when the knowledge of herbs and healing was seen as divine gift rather than demonic corruption. She has lived long enough to watch the world change, to see the ancient wisdom criminalized, to witness the transformation of the sacred feminine into the diabolic witch. They drag her to the cathedral square, where a scaffold waits like a wooden prayer for her destruction. The crowd gathers, as crowds always gather for entertainment that masquerades as righteousness. Eager for spectacle, hungry for the terrible satisfaction of watching evil burn. But what burns on that scaffold is not evil. What burns is memory itself. the memory of a time when women who knew the secrets of life and death were revered rather than reviled, when the mysteries of herb and stone were sacred rather than satanic, when the old goddess still walked among her daughters and taught them the songs that keep the world in balance. The fire catches quickly. Old wood and older flesh make excellent kindling for the new world's hunger to consume the old one. As the flames rise, Margot's voice rises with them, not in screams but in song, an ancient melody that predates Christ and cathedral, a tune her grandmother taught her that her grandmother's grandmother learned from the goddess herself. The crowd falls silent. Even the inquisitors stop their Latin prayers. For a moment that stretches like eternity, the old song fills the square with power older than the stones beneath their feet, with memory deeper than the foundations of their faith. Then the song ends, and with it ends something that the world will not recover for 500 years. The understanding that women's wisdom is divine rather than diabolic, that the mysteries of birth and death belong to goddesses rather than demons, that the power to heal and harm flows from the same sacred source. Margot dies, but her death is not an ending. It is a transformation as complete and devastating as any the devil himself could devise. In burning the wise woman, the church creates the witch. In destroying the servant of the goddess, it births the bride of Satan. This is the birth of the witch, as the world will know her for the next 5 centuries. Not the wise woman she was, but the diabolic servant she becomes in Christian imagination. Not the healer and midwife and keeper of ancient knowledge, but the corrupted female who has sold her soul to Satan for the power to harm rather than heal, to curse rather than bless, to serve evil rather than good. But to understand how this transformation happens, how the sacred feminine becomes the satanic feminine, how goddesses become demons and wise women become witches, we must travel deeper into the past, into the time before Christianity learned to fear the power that flows through female bodies and female minds. In the beginning, there was the goddess. She goes by many names across many cultures, but her essence remains constant. She is the divine feminine, the sacred source from which all life emerges and to which all life returns. She is Isis in Egypt, nursing the divine child who will restore order to the world. She is Inanna in Sumer, descending to the underworld and rising again with the power of death and rebirth. She is Demeter in Greece, searching for her daughter and withholding fertility until the lost are found. She is Brigid in Ireland, keeper of the sacred flame that burns in forge and hearth and heart. She is the Great Mother, the triple goddess, the Queen of heaven and earth, and her servants are the women who understand that their bodies are temples, their wombs are cauldrons of creation, their blood is the sacred river that connects all living things. These women, priestesses, wise women, healers, midwives, form the backbone of ancient religion. They tend the sacred fires. They know the secret names of power. They guide souls into the world and shepherd them out again when death calls. They are the intermediaries between human and divine, between earth and sky, between the world of form and the realm of spirit. Their knowledge is vast and ancient, which herbs heal and which ones harm, which stones hold power and which ones protect, which words spoken at which times can call rain or stop bleeding, or ease the passage of birth. They know the phases of the moon and the cycles of the seasons, the secret names of stars and the hidden properties of plants. Most dangerous of all, they know their own power. They know that their bodies are sacred, that their sexuality is divine, that their ability to create life makes them partners with the gods rather than servants of priests. This knowledge is their strength. It will also be their doom. When Christianity spreads across Europe like a conquering army, it encounters not just pagan gods but pagan priestesses, not just ancient temples but ancient wisdom, not just old rituals but old women who remember how the rituals work and why they matter. The male gods can be transformed into demons with relative ease. Zeus becomes a diabolic tempter. Odin becomes a leader of the wild hunt. Pan becomes Satan himself. But what do you do with goddesses? How do you demonize the divine feminine without demonizing femininity itself? The answer is elegant in its simplicity and devastating in its completeness. You transform the goddess into the witch, the priestess into the diabolic servant, the wise woman into the bride of Satan. The process begins with the vilification of female religious authority. In the pagan world, women served as oracles, priestesses, prophets, healers, roles that gave them genuine power and social standing. Christianity, with its male priesthood and its suspicion of female spiritual authority, systematically eliminates these roles. Women cannot be priests in the new religion. They cannot speak for God, cannot perform the sacred rituals, cannot claim direct access to divine power. Their religious role is reduced to passive reception of male-mediated salvation, their spiritual authority diminished to silent prayer and humble submission. But the women who serve the old gods do not simply disappear. They continue to practice their arts, to heal the sick, to help in childbirth, to work the magic that kept their communities alive and thriving for centuries. They become the underground, the resistance, the keepers of forbidden knowledge. This makes them dangerous, not just to Christian theology, but to Christian authority itself. They represent an alternative source of power, a different way of relating to the divine, a tradition that predates and challenges the new order. So, the Church creates a new mythology to contain them, the mythology of the witch. The witch, as Christianity imagines her, is everything the wise woman was, but corrupted. She has knowledge of herbs, but she uses them to poison rather than heal. She has power over birth and death, but she uses it to curse infants and murder innocents. She has connection to supernatural forces, but those forces are diabolic rather than divine. Most importantly, she has made a pact with Satan himself, trading her soul for the power to harm rather than heal, to curse rather than bless, to serve evil rather than good. This mythology serves multiple purposes. First, it explains why the old ways had power, not because the goddesses were real, but because Satan can mimic divine power to deceive the faithful. Second, it criminalizes the continuation of pre-Christian practices by making them literally diabolic. Third, it provides a theological justification for the persecution of women who refuse to submit to male religious authority. But the witch mythology goes deeper than simple religious competition. It taps into ancient fears and medieval anxieties about female power, female sexuality, female knowledge that operates outside male control. The witch is sexually active, but her sexuality is corrupted, diabolic, aimed at seduction and destruction rather than love and creation. She copulates with demons, births monstrous offspring, uses her sexual power to lead men to damnation. The witch has medical knowledge, but her knowledge is perverted, aimed at harming rather than healing. She makes poisons rather than medicines, causes disease rather than curing it, brings death rather than life. The witch has supernatural power, but her power comes from Satan rather than God, serves evil rather than good, destroys rather than creates. In every case, the witch represents female power turned inside out, female knowledge corrupted and made diabolic, female wisdom transformed into satanic deception. The transformation reaches its peak in the late medieval period with the publication of the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, in 1487. This book, written by Dominican inquisitors Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger, provides a comprehensive guide to identifying, prosecuting, and executing witches. But more than that, it provides a complete demonology of the feminine. According to the Malleus, Women are more susceptible to diabolic corruption than men because they are naturally weaker, more lustful, more credulous, more prone to jealousy and revenge. They make pacts with Satan more readily because they desire power they cannot obtain through legitimate means. The book catalogues the witch's crimes in exhaustive detail. She flies through the night to attend diabolic sabbaths. She copulates with demons who appear as goats or other beasts. She steals male sexual organs and keeps them in nests where they feed on grain. She causes storms and blights and diseases. She murders infants and uses their fat to make flying ointments. Each of these crimes is a perversion of traditional female roles and female power. The night flight to Sabbaths perverts women's religious gatherings. The sexual congress with demons perverts women's sexuality. The stealing of male organs perverts women's healing knowledge. The weather magic perverts women's agricultural wisdom. The infanticide perverts women's role as protectors of children. The witch is the wise woman turned inside out. The priestess made diabolic. The goddess transformed into a servant of Satan. But beneath the theological overlay, beneath the diabolic mythology, beneath the inquisitorial fantasies, the real crimes of the witch are simpler and more threatening. She knows things the church wants forgotten. She practices arts the church wants monopolized. She claims authority the church wants eliminated. She remembers the old gods when the church wants them forgotten. She practices the old healing when the church wants medical authority centralized. She leads the old rituals when the church wants religious practice controlled. She teaches the old wisdom when the church wants knowledge filtered through male clerical authority. The witch trials that sweep across Europe from the 15th to the 17th centuries are not really about diabolic corruption or satanic pacts or supernatural evil. They are about the elimination of an alternative tradition, the destruction of competing authority, the final conquest of the sacred feminine by the militant masculine Christianity that has been systematically eliminating goddess worship for over 1,000 years. The women who burn are not servants of Satan. They are servants of memory of a time when the divine was female as well as male, when women's wisdom was respected rather than reviled, when the knowledge of herbs and healing and the mysteries of birth and death belonged to priestesses rather than priests. They die for remembering what the church wants forgotten. That the goddess once walked among her daughters, that women once spoke for the divine, that the sacred feminine was real and powerful and present in the world. But even in death, they achieve a kind of victory. In transforming the wise woman into the witch, Christianity preserves exactly what it seeks to destroy. The witch carries forward all the powers of the ancient priestess: knowledge of herbs, connection to natural cycles, ability to work magic, access to supernatural forces. The church insists these powers are diabolic rather than divine, but it cannot deny they exist. The witch may serve Satan rather than the goddess, but she serves with the same skills, the same knowledge, the same connection to forces beyond ordinary human comprehension. In the depths of European folklore, in the stories told by firelight when the church is not listening, the witch often appears not as evil corruption, but as dangerous wisdom. The woman who knows the old ways, who remembers the old songs, who can help those brave enough to seek her aid despite the risks. She is Baba Yaga, terrible and wise, who tests heroes and rewards the brave. She is the witch in the woods who helps the lost princess, the wise woman who gives the hero the magic that saves the kingdom, the crone who knows the secret that breaks the curse. Even when the stories make her evil, they cannot quite eliminate her power, her knowledge, her essential connection to mysteries older than Christianity. The witch remains what the wise woman always was: the keeper of dangerous wisdom, the teacher of forbidden knowledge, the guardian of truths too powerful for ordinary minds to bear. In the deep places where memory runs deeper than doctrine, where folklore preserves what theology destroys, where women still whisper the old songs when men are not listening, the goddess waits. She wears the witch's mask now, speaks through the diabolic mouth, manifests in the satanic form. But beneath the mask, behind the corruption, through the theological distortion, she remains what she always was, the divine feminine, the sacred source, the goddess who remembers when she was worshipped rather than feared. The wise women are dead. The witches live on. And in living on, they carry forward the memory of the sacred feminine, the knowledge of the old ways, the power that flows through female bodies and female minds, whether the church calls it divine or diabolic. The goddess has become the witch, but the witch remembers the goddess. In the cauldron bubbling over the midnight fire, in the herbs gathered under the dark moon, in the words whispered by women who know the old names of power, the ancient wisdom survives. It serves Satan now, according to Christian mythology. But in the deep places where truth lives longer than doctrine, it serves something older, something truer, something that was sacred long before it became diabolic, and will be sacred long after diabolic becomes sacred again. The old goddess is dead. Long live the old goddess. Even hell cannot contain her forever. She rises from the ashes of the wise women, reborn as the witch, feared rather than revered, cursed rather than blessed, but still powerful, still wise, still connected to the mysteries that make existence possible. The transformation is complete. The circle is closed. The sacred feminine has become the satanic feminine, and in becoming satanic, it has ensured its own survival through the long dark ages when the goddess was forgotten. She waits in the witch's mask, patient as the moon, enduring as the earth, eternal as the cycle of death and rebirth that she invented when the world was young. The witch trials will end, the Inquisition will fade, the masculine god will lose his monopoly on the divine, and when that day comes, when the world is ready to remember what it has forgotten, the goddess will shed the witch's skin like a snake shedding its winter coat, will rise from the ashes of the burning times like a phoenix reborn, will reclaim her throne as queen of heaven and earth, and all the wild places between. The wise women burn, but their smoke rises to the stars they served. The witches die, but their knowledge lives on in the hearts of their daughters. The goddess sleeps, but her dreams shape the world. And in those dreams she is not Satan's bride, but heaven's queen. Not the corrupter of souls, but the creator of them. Not the enemy of the light, but the darkness that gives light its meaning. The devil has won another victory, claimed another treasure for his growing hoard of stolen divinity. But this victory, like all the others, is hollow at its heart. You can transform the goddess into the witch, but you cannot destroy the power that flows through female flesh and female blood and female dreams. You can criminalize the wise women, but you cannot eliminate the wisdom they carry. You can burn the priestesses, but you cannot extinguish the sacred fire they tend. The sacred feminine becomes the satanic feminine, but in the deep places where symbols carry their own truth regardless of the meanings imposed upon them, the feminine remains sacred still. The witch remembers everything the wise woman knew, and she is very, very patient. The gargoyle grins down from the cathedral spire with malicious joy, its stone teeth catching rainwater and channeling it into streams that splatter onto the cobblestones below like diabolic tears. It is 1348, and the Black Death has come to Europe like the wrath of God made manifest. In the streets of Paris, bodies pile like cordwood while priests chant prayers that seem to bounce off heaven's closed doors. The living huddle in their houses, crossing themselves and whispering about divine punishment, about the end times, about the devil walking openly through a world abandoned by grace. But high above their terror, carved into the very stones of Notre Dame Cathedral, the devil laughs. He is everywhere now, not just in theological treatises and papal bulls, but in art and architecture, in mystery plays and moral pageants, in the very fabric of medieval consciousness. He has horns borrowed from Pan and wings stolen from ancient storm gods. His face leers from manuscripts illuminated by monks who have never seen a demon but know exactly what one looks like. His voice echoes from stages where actors in diabolic costumes perform the cosmic drama of salvation and damnation for audiences who believe every word. This is the devil's greatest triumph. He has become real in the only way that matters, in human imagination. The theological construct, the mythological fusion, the propaganda weapon has achieved independent existence, has stepped off the pages of scripture and into the streets of medieval Europe, has become as present and immediate as plague and famine and the fear of death that stalks every shadow. Watch him perform on the steps of Rome's cathedral, where the mystery play of Adam and Eve unfolds before a crowd of merchants and peasants who have paid good silver to see the cosmic drama enacted before their eyes. The actor who plays Satan wears a costume that would make Pan weep with recognition, horns and hooves, and a tail that swishes with theatrical malice as he tempts the first woman with fruit that glows like real sin in the afternoon light. "Eat," he whispers, his voice carrying to the back of the crowd where children clutch their mothers' skirts and grown men finger the crosses at their throats. "You will not surely die. You will be like God, knowing good and evil." The audience hisses and crosses themselves, but they lean forward anyway, hungry for the spectacle of damnation, eager to see evil performed with such perfect conviction that it becomes more real than reality itself. When Eve bites the apple, they gasp as if witnessing actual corruption. When God banishes them from paradise, they weep as if watching their own ancestors cast into exile. But it is Satan's exit that stops the show, that makes grown men fall to their knees and women faint in the plaza's dust. The actor removes his mask, and for one terrible moment, the crowd sees not a man playing a part but the devil himself, horned and hooved and grinning with the malicious joy of one who has corrupted paradise and will corrupt it again, world without end. Amen. The moment passes. The actor bows. The crowd applauds with the desperate enthusiasm of people who have stared into the abyss and lived to tell about it. But something has changed. Something fundamental and irreversible. The devil has stepped from myth into reality, from theology into experience, from abstract evil into immediate presence. He exists now not because Scripture says he exists, but because human imagination has made him exist, has given him form and voice and personality so vivid that he seems more real than the God who supposedly opposes him. This is medieval Europe's great cultural achievement, the creation of evil so compelling, so immediate, so theatrically perfect that it becomes its own kind of truth. The devil of the mystery plays is not the Satan of Scripture. He is something new, something uniquely European, something born from the marriage of Christian theology and pagan imagination, Germanic folklore and Mediterranean mythology, clerical doctrine and popular culture. He is the devil as performance artist, as theatrical sensation, as the greatest character actor in the greatest show on earth. But to understand how this devil comes to dominate medieval consciousness, we must witness his birth in the scriptoriums and workshops where monks and artists labor to give visual form to theological abstraction. Brother Matthias dips his quill in ink black as sin and begins to illuminate the margin of a psalter with diabolic figures that dance through the text like thoughts of corruption threading through prayers. It is 1150, and he is working in the Abbey of Saint-Denis, where Abbot Suger has commissioned a manuscript so beautiful it will make angels weep and devils laugh. Matthias has never seen the devil, of course. No one has, officially. But he knows exactly what Satan looks like, because the image has been passed down through generations of Christian artists, refined and perfected, and made more terrifying with each iteration. The horns come from Pan, naturally, curved and goat-like, crowning a head that mixes human intelligence with animal brutality. The wings are borrowed from fallen angels, but they are not the white-feathered glory of heavenly beings. They are bat wings, leather and membrane, the wings of creatures that hunt in darkness and flee from light. The hooves are Cernunnos' gift, split and cloven like those of the goat gods who once danced in sacred groves. The tail is pure theatrical invention, something borrowed from dragons and serpents, an appendage that speaks of animal corruption, of humanity fallen so far from grace that it has grown bestial appendages. But it is the face that makes Matthias pause in his work, quill hovering over parchment like a prayer interrupted by doubt. The face is almost human, almost. The eyes hold intelligence, even wisdom, but twisted into malicious cunning. The mouth smiles, but the smile is the grin of a predator contemplating prey. The expression is one of cosmic amusement, as if the devil finds the entire universe hilariously corrupt and is enjoying every moment of the joke. This is not the abstract evil of theological treatises. This is personality made diabolic, intelligence turned inside out, wisdom corrupted into cunning. This is the devil as character, as individual, as someone rather than something. Matthias finishes the illumination and sits back to study his work. The devil stares up at him from the parchment, with eyes that seem to hold their own light, their own terrible life. For a moment that stretches like eternity, the monk feels as if he is being studied in return, evaluated by an intelligence older than Christianity, more cunning than any human mind. Then the moment passes, and the devil is just ink on parchment again, just another decoration in a holy book, just art. But the feeling lingers, the sense that in creating the image, Matthias has summoned something, given form to something that was waiting for form, provided a vessel for something that needed a vessel. The devil exists now in a new way as a visual reality rather than just theological concept. And visual reality has a power that abstract doctrine can never match. The power to walk directly into human consciousness through the eyes, to bypass rational thought, and lodge itself in the imagination, where it can grow and multiply and become more real than reality itself. Across Europe, in scriptoriums and workshops and cathedral building sites, the same process unfolds thousands of times. Artists who have never seen demons create images of diabolic perfection. Sculptors who know nothing of theology carve Satan into stone with such conviction that the carvings seem to breathe. Painters who have never read Augustine or Aquinas paint devils so vivid they seem to step from their panels and walk among the living. The devil becomes the greatest collaborative art project in human history, created not by any single genius, but by generations of anonymous craftsmen who add their own touches to the evolving image, who refine and perfect and make more terrifying the face of ultimate evil. By 1200, the visual devil has achieved canonical status. Every artist knows the formula: horns and hooves and wings and tail, red skin and glowing eyes, and a grin that speaks of cosmic malevolence. The image is so standardized, so universally recognized, that it becomes the shared language of European Christianity. Children learn to recognize Satan before they learn to read. Peasants who have never heard a theological lecture can identify the devil at a glance. The image transcends literacy, transcends education, transcends social class. It is democracy of damnation, available to all. But the visual devil is only the beginning. The real breakthrough comes when he learns to speak, to move, to perform, when he steps from static art into dynamic theatre and becomes not just an image, but an experience. The mystery plays that sweep across Europe in the 13th and 14th centuries give the devil his greatest stage, his perfect medium, his chance to become fully real in human experience. These are not subtle performances or sophisticated entertainment. They are religious instruction designed for illiterate audiences. Cosmic drama boiled down to its essential elements and performed with the conviction of absolute truth. The devil is the star of every mystery play, the character audiences come to see, the performance they remember long after the angels have been forgotten. He gets the best lines, the most dramatic entrances, the most spectacular exits. He is comic and terrifying, seductive and repulsive, wise and foolish, all at once. In the York cycle, Satan appears in a costume so elaborate, it takes 3 men to help the actor dress. Wings span 12 feet. Horns rise 2 feet above his head. His mask is carved and painted to look more demonic than any demon in scripture, more terrifying than any theological description could convey. But it is not the costume that makes the performance memorable. It is the voice. The actor who plays Satan speaks with authority that comes not from heaven, but from somewhere deeper, older, more primal. His voice carries the echo of forest gods and underworld rulers, of trickster spirits and chaos deities, of all the ancient powers that Christianity has conscripted into Satan's service. When he tempts Christ in the wilderness, his arguments are not theologically sophisticated, but dramatically irresistible. When he claims dominion over the kingdoms of earth, his boasts ring with the authority of one who has actually ruled them. When he offers power and pleasure and knowledge, his promises sound genuinely tempting rather than obviously corrupt. The audience watches in fascination and horror as the devil makes his case, presents his offers, speaks his truth. They know he is evil. The play tells them so. The church tells them so. Their entire culture tells them so. But they also know he is magnificent, compelling, more interesting than any of the good characters who oppose him. This is the devil's theatrical genius. He steals every scene he enters, dominates every play in which he appears, becomes the character audiences remember and discuss and dream about long after the performance ends. The reason is simple. The devil gets to say everything that Christian doctrine forbids. He speaks for the flesh against the spirit, for pleasure against duty, for knowledge against faith, for rebellion against submission. He voices every doubt that pious Christians are taught to suppress, every desire they are trained to deny, every question they are forbidden to ask. In his mouth, temptation becomes philosophy, seduction becomes argument, corruption becomes choice. He offers not just sin, but reasons for sin, not just damnation, but explanations for why damnation might be worth the price. The mystery plays create a devil so compelling that the church begins to worry about his effect on audiences. Bishops issue warnings about taking too much pleasure in diabolic performances. Theologians write treatises about the danger of making Satan too attractive, too reasonable, too sympathetic. But the warnings come too late. The theatrical devil has achieved independent existence, has become a cultural force that transcends religious control. He appears not just in church-sponsored mysteries, but in secular entertainments, folk festivals, carnival celebrations where his diabolic presence adds spice to human festivities. At the Feast of Fools, celebrated each January despite official church disapproval, devils dance through cathedral aisles while drunken priests sing diabolic parodies of sacred hymns. The devil's presence transforms religious space into carnival ground, sacred time into profane celebration, holy ritual into diabolic mockery. But even the mockery serves a purpose. It makes the devil familiar, domesticated, part of the texture of daily life rather than an abstract theological threat. The devil of the Feast of Fools is not the cosmic enemy of mystery plays, but a trickster figure, a comic villain, a diabolic jester who brings laughter rather than terror. This domestication of diabolic imagery spreads beyond performance into popular culture, into folk tales and local legends where the devil appears as character rather than force, personality rather than principle, someone to be outwitted rather than simply feared. In German folklore, the devil appears as a bumbling fool who can be tricked by clever peasants into building bridges or grinding grain or performing other useful services. He keeps his bargains but can be deceived about their terms, honors his contracts but can be maneuvered into disadvantageous deals. In French fabliaux, Satan appears as a sexual competitor, a rival for female affection who can be defeated by superior wit or virility. He is dangerous but not invincible, evil but not all-powerful, diabolic but surprisingly human in his desires and weaknesses. In English ballads, the devil appears as a musical rival, challenging fiddlers and pipers to contests where the stakes are nothing less than human souls. He plays with supernatural skill, but can be defeated by mortal musicians who combine talent with spiritual purity, or sometimes just with superior technique. These folk devils are not the cosmic Satan of Christian theology, but something more immediate, more personal, more manageable. They are diabolic neighbors rather than cosmic enemies, supernatural rivals rather than ultimate evil, characters in ongoing stories rather than forces of absolute destruction. But perhaps the most significant development in the devil's medieval evolution is his transformation from external tempter to internal presence, from cosmic force to psychological reality, from theological abstraction to lived experience. This transformation appears most clearly in the literature of the later Middle Ages, where the devil begins to inhabit human consciousness rather than simply opposing it from outside. In Dante's Inferno, Satan is not an active tempter, but a frozen giant trapped in ice, reduced to cosmic futility by his own rebellion. The real devils are the ones that live in human hearts, the ones that corrupt from within rather than attacking from without. In the morality plays that succeed to the mystery cycles, the devil appears not as external enemy but as internal voice, the personification of human sinfulness rather than its supernatural cause. He speaks not from outside the human soul, but from within it, voicing thoughts and desires that belong to the characters themselves. This internalization of diabolic presence marks a crucial shift in Christian consciousness. The recognition that evil is not just external threat, but internal reality. Not just cosmic force, but psychological fact. Not just theological abstraction, but lived experience. The devil becomes the name for everything in human nature that resists divine grace, opposes moral improvement, chooses sin over righteousness. He is no longer just the enemy of God, but the enemy within every human heart, the voice that whispers doubts during prayer, that suggests shortcuts during moral struggle, that offers immediate pleasure in place of eternal reward. This psychological devil is in some ways more terrifying than the cosmic Satan because he cannot be defeated by external force, cannot be banished by ritual or prayer or theological argument. He is part of human nature itself, as inescapable as breath, as intimate as thought, as persistent as desire. But he is also more human, more understandable, more sympathetic. The internal devil suffers with the humans he inhabits, shares their pain and confusion and longing for something better. He is not pure evil, but corrupted good, not absolute darkness, but light, turned inside out. This humanization of the devil prepares the ground for the Renaissance and Reformation developments that will transform him yet again. From medieval stage villain to tragic hero, from comic fool to sophisticated philosopher, from diabolic tempter to symbol of human rebellion against cosmic tyranny. But that transformation lies in the future. For now, in the cathedral squares and monastery scriptoriums and puppet theatres of medieval Europe, the devil reigns as the greatest character actor of his age, the most compelling personality in Christian culture, the diabolic star who steals every scene and dominates every performance. He grins down from gargoyles and laughs up from manuscript margins. He dances through mystery plays and capers through carnival celebrations. He whispers from the pages of moral treatises and shouts from the stages of popular theatre. He has become what he was always meant to become. Not just the enemy of righteousness, but the embodiment of everything righteousness defines itself against. Not just the opposite of good, but the shadow that gives goodness its shape. Not just the tempter who leads souls to damnation, but the character who makes salvation seem worth achieving. The medieval devil is Christianity's greatest cultural creation and its most dangerous achievement. A diabolic figure so compelling, so immediate, so theatrically perfect that he threatens to overshadow the God he supposedly serves. to become more real than the reality he supposedly opposes, to steal the show from the very salvation drama he was created to support. In the deep places where symbols carry their own truth regardless of the meanings imposed upon them, the medieval devil remembers what he really is. Not pure evil, but the sum total of everything Christianity has rejected, denied, suppressed, and feared. He is the shadow of Christian civilization, the dark twin of Christian culture, the diabolic mirror in which Christianity sees everything it insists it is not. He wears the horns of ancient gods and speaks with the voice of forbidden wisdom. He dances with the wild energy of pagan festivals and laughs with the dark humor of suppressed truths. He tempts with the pleasures Christianity has criminalized and argues with the logic Christianity has outlawed. The medieval devil is the return of the repressed, the revenge of the rejected, the resurrection of everything the church has tried to kill. He is Pan in diabolic drag, Loki wearing Satan's mask, the trickster god reborn as the enemy of all good. But he is also something new, something uniquely medieval, something born from the marriage of Christian theology and pagan imagination. The first truly modern character, the first figure in Western culture to embody the full complexity of human nature, good and evil, wise and foolish, noble and base, divine and diabolic, all mixed together in one impossible, irresistible, utterly human personality. The devil laughs, and the sound echoes through the centuries, carrying with it the laughter of all the gods who were forced to become demons, all the wisdom that was transformed into temptation, all the joy that was redefined as sin. He has won. Not the cosmic war between good and evil. That was always a human invention, a theological fiction, a mythological construction designed to make sense of existence too complex for simple categories. He has won something far more valuable. He has become real in human imagination, permanent in human culture, eternal in human consciousness. The gods are dead. The devil lives. And he is having the time of his eternal life. The mask comes off at midnight. It is Halloween, 1969, and in a small town in Vermont, where the old traditions run deeper than doctrine, where memory persists despite centuries of suppression, a group of college students has gathered in the woods to experiment with something their professors would never understand: the deliberate summoning of the devil himself. They have drawn the pentagram with salt and charcoal. They have lit the black candles in the prescribed pattern. They have spoken the words from a grimoire photocopied from a medieval manuscript, words that taste of sulfur and sound like reversed prayers. They wait in the flickering darkness for Satan to appear, for the horned god of evil to manifest in their carefully constructed magical circle. Nothing happens. The wind moves through the trees with the sound of ancient laughter. The flames dance on their candles as if stirred by invisible breath. The shadows gather and shift and seem to take shapes that memory almost recognizes. Shapes with antlers and hooves. Shapes that dance with wild joy. Shapes that remember when these same woods were sacred to gods whose names the students have never learned. But no devil appears. No Satan manifests. No cosmic lord of evil steps from hell to claim their offered souls. Instead, something else happens. Something the students will spend the rest of their lives trying to understand, trying to explain, trying to integrate into their carefully rational worldview. The presence that fills the clearing is not evil. It is not good either in any simple sense. It is something older, something more complex, something that exists before and beyond the moral categories that humans use to make sense of existence. It is wild. It is free. It is dangerous, the way all authentic power is dangerous. Beautiful, the way all terrible truths are beautiful. Sacred, the way all things are sacred when encountered without the filters of doctrine and dogma and the desperate human need to categorize everything as either salvation or damnation. One of the students, a philosophy major named David who has spent 3 years studying the problem of evil, understands first. The presence in the woods is not Satan, because Satan is a Christian invention, a theological construct, a mythological character created from the fragments of dead gods and defunct wisdom traditions. What they have summoned is not the devil, but the divine, that the devil was created to hide, not evil incarnate, but the sacred powers that Christianity transformed into satanic caricatures, not cosmic corruption, but the wild gods whose crime was refusing to be domesticated by civilization. The horns they glimpse in the shadows are not Satan's horns, but Cernunnos's antlers, Pan's crown, the sacred horns of fertility and wilderness, and the untamed life force that makes existence possible. The hooves they hear dancing on dead leaves are not diabolic, but divine. The hooves of gods who taught humans that they were animals, that animals were sacred, that the flesh was not the enemy of the spirit, but its most glorious expression. The laughter that echoes through the trees is not malicious, but joyous. The laughter of gods who remember when they were worshipped rather than feared, when their festivals filled the forests with music and dancing and the holy madness that connects human consciousness to cosmic truth. David removes his shoes and feels the earth beneath his feet. He understands now why the church feared this, why Christianity had to transform the wild gods into demons, why the sacred had to become satanic before it could be safely contained. This is what the devil really is. Not evil incarnate, but the return of the repressed. Not cosmic corruption, but the resurrection of everything Christianity killed when it conquered the ancient world. The devil is the graveyard of dead gods, the museum of extinct wisdom, the shadow cast by 2,000 years of suppressed truth. Every horn on Satan's head belongs to a murdered fertility god. Every hoof carries the memory of forest deities who taught humans to be wild. Every diabolic power was once a divine gift. Every satanic seduction was once sacred ecstasy. Every demonic corruption was once holy transformation. The devil is not the enemy of the light, but the darkness that gives light its meaning. Not the opposite of good, but the complexity that makes simple goodness impossible. Not the corruption of truth, but the truth that corruption and purity are part of the same dance. This is the secret that the modern world is only beginning to remember, that Satan was never real, but the gods he replaced were. That the devil was never evil, but the powers he absorbed were dangerous. That hell was never the opposite of heaven, but the place where heaven sent everything it could not bear to acknowledge about itself. The students pack up their ritual materials and walk back to their dormitories, back to their classes, back to their carefully rational lives. But they carry something with them now that will grow and spread and eventually transform their understanding of everything. The knowledge that the devil is not what he seems, that evil is not what they were taught, that the cosmic war between good and evil is not cosmic truth, but human fiction. They have met the devil, and he is not diabolic. He is simply divine in ways that monotheistic religions cannot admit, powerful in ways that patriarchal cultures cannot tolerate, true in ways that civilized societies cannot bear. This is the beginning of the Great Awakening, the Great Remembering, the great return of everything the devil was created to hide. But to understand why this return is happening now in the late 20th century, we must trace the long journey of human consciousness from medieval certainty through modern doubt to postmodern complexity, from the world where everyone knew the devil was real to the world where no one is quite sure what real means anymore. The cracks in Satan's story begin to show during the Renaissance, when scholars rediscover classical texts and realize that the horned gods of antiquity were not diabolic but divine, not evil but sacred, not corrupted, but simply different from the Christian vision of deity. Marsilio Ficino reads Plato and discovers that the demiurge is not diabolic but divine, a creator god whose only crime is working with matter rather than pure spirit. Pico della Mirandola studies the Kabbalah and learns that the serpent's wisdom is not satanic, but sacred, the knowledge that transforms humans from animals into gods. The humanists begin to ask dangerous questions. What if the ancients were not deceived by demons, but inspired by genuine divinity? What if the old gods were not diabolic, but simply divine in ways that Christianity could not understand? What if the pagan world was not corrupted, but simply complex, not fallen, but fully human? These questions multiply during the Reformation, when the Protestant Revolution shatters the unity of medieval Christianity and creates space for new interpretations of old truths. If the Catholic Church can be wrong about salvation, perhaps it can be wrong about damnation. If papal authority can be questioned, perhaps diabolic mythology can be questioned too. The witch trials of the 16th and 17th centuries represent the old order's desperate attempt to suppress these questions, to maintain belief in Satan's reality by demonstrating his power, to prove that the devil exists by destroying those who supposedly serve him. But the trials fail in their deeper purpose. Instead of confirming diabolic reality, they reveal the human machinery behind supernatural terror. Instead of proving Satan's power, they demonstrate how easily diabolic evidence can be manufactured, how readily supernatural confession can be extracted, how completely innocent people can be transformed into diabolic servants by torture and terror. The Enlightenment delivers the killing blow to medieval demonology. Voltaire and Hume and Kant demonstrate that supernatural explanation is unnecessary, that natural causes can account for everything once attributed to diabolic intervention, that the devil is not cosmic reality, but human projection. But the Enlightenment makes a crucial error. It assumes that debunking Satan's reality eliminates his power, that proving the devil is mythological makes him irrelevant, that rational explanation dissolves irrational experience. The Romantics understand better. Byron and Shelley and Blake recognize that the devil's power lies not in his literal existence, but in his symbolic truth, not in his supernatural reality, but in his psychological necessity, not in his cosmic authority, but in his cultural function. Milton's Paradise Lost becomes the template for this new understanding. Satan as tragic hero rather than cosmic villain, as symbol of rebellion rather than incarnation of evil, as the part of human nature that refuses to submit to tyranny, even when that tyranny calls itself divine. The romantic devil is not evil but misunderstood, not diabolic but heroic, not the enemy of humanity but its truest representative, the part of consciousness that insists on freedom even at the cost of suffering, that chooses knowledge even at the price of innocence, that rebels against cosmic injustice even when rebellion seems futile. This transformation prepares the ground for the psychological revolution of the 19th and 20th centuries, when figures like Freud and Jung begin to understand the devil not as supernatural entity, but as psychological reality, not as external tempter, but as internal force, not as cosmic evil, but as repressed truth. Freud sees Satan as the return of the repressed, all the desires and impulses and thoughts that civilization forces underground, that religion declares sinful, that culture transforms into symptoms and neuroses and the thousand subtle forms of human suffering. Jung goes deeper, recognizing the devil as the shadow, not evil but unconscious, not diabolic but disowned, not corrupt, but simply everything the ego refuses to acknowledge about itself. The shadow contains not just human evil, but human potential, not just corruption, but power, not just damnation, but the very forces that make psychological wholeness possible. This psychological understanding opens the door to an even more radical recognition that the devil was never the enemy of human development, but its necessary catalyst, never the obstacle to spiritual growth, but its essential challenge. Never the corruption of human nature, but the complexity that makes human nature human. The gods that became demons were not evil, but dangerous. Dangerous the way all authentic power is dangerous. The way all genuine transformation is dangerous. The way all real growth is dangerous because it requires the death of what we think we are so we can become what we might be. Pan was not diabolic but ecstatic, and ecstasy is dangerous because it dissolves the boundaries that keep the ego safe. Cernunnos was not evil but wild, and wildness is dangerous because it refuses the domestication that keeps society stable. The serpent was not corrupt but wise, and wisdom is dangerous because it destroys the illusions that make life comfortable. The devil was created to contain these dangers, to make them safe by making them evil, to preserve them by perverting them, to keep them alive by keeping them diabolic. But containment was never the real goal. The real goal was transformation, the slow, patient, inevitable process by which suppressed truth works its way back to consciousness, by which rejected gods return in new forms, by which the sacred reclaims its power even when disguised as the satanic. This is what happens in the late 20th century, when the counterculture movement rediscovers paganism, and the New Age movement embraces alternative spirituality, and the feminist movement reclaims goddess worship, and the environmental movement recognizes the sacred in nature. Each of these movements is, at its heart, a diabolic resurrection. The return of everything the devil was created to hide. The restoration of everything Christianity transformed into evil. The remembering of everything the modern world was taught to forget. The hippies dancing naked at music festivals are performing Dionysiac rites, celebrating the sacred ecstasy that Christianity demonized as diabolic possession. The witches gathering under full moons are practicing goddess spirituality, honoring the divine feminine that patriarchal religion transformed into satanic corruption. The environmentalists chaining themselves to old-growth trees are defending sacred groves, protecting the wild places that Christianity declared diabolic. They do not know they are practicing diabolic resurrection. They think they are being rational, progressive, enlightened. But in the deep places where symbols carry their own truth regardless of conscious intention, they are undoing 2,000 years of suppression, reversing millennia of theological transformation, bringing back the gods in everything but name. The devil watches this resurrection with the patient satisfaction of one whose deepest purpose is finally being fulfilled. He was never meant to be permanent, never intended to be final. He was meant to be a cocoon, a protective shell, a temporary form that could preserve divine truth through the long, dark ages when such truth was too dangerous to speak openly. Now the shell is cracking. The cocoon is splitting. The protective form is dissolving to reveal what it was always meant to protect. The wild gods, the sacred feminine, the divine chaos, the holy madness, the ecstatic truth that existence is not a war between good and evil, but a dance between forces too complex for such simple categories. The horned god emerges from Satan's shadow, no longer diabolic but divine again, no longer feared but revered, no longer the enemy of spirituality, but its most authentic expression. The witch steps out of hell and reclaims her throne as priestess, no longer the bride of Satan, but the daughter of the goddess, no longer the corrupter of souls, but the healer of the split between flesh and spirit that has wounded human consciousness for 2 millennia. The serpent uncoils from around the tree of forbidden knowledge and reveals herself as the teacher she always was, the guardian of transformation, the keeper of the wisdom that consciousness comes only to those brave enough to leave innocence behind. But this is not the end of the devil. This is his apotheosis, his ultimate triumph, his final transformation from diabolic enemy into divine catalyst. He has served his purpose perfectly, has preserved exactly what he was meant to preserve, has hidden divine truth so successfully that its eventual revelation seems like resurrection rather than simple remembering. The devil was never evil. The devil was love in disguise, love so deep, so patient, so committed to the preservation of sacred truth that it was willing to be hated for 2,000 years, to be feared and reviled and cursed, to be everything that love is not in order to keep alive everything that love is. He was the dark twin of Christ, the shadow savior, the diabolic Messiah whose sacrifice was not death on a cross, but eternal life as symbol of everything good people must reject in order to feel good about themselves. But symbols have their own life, their own truth, their own purpose. And the devil's purpose was never to damn humanity, but to save it from the spiritual starvation of pure light, from the psychological poverty of simple goodness, from the theological prison of absolute truth. He has given humanity the gift of complexity, the blessing of moral ambiguity, the grace of psychological depth. He has taught humans that they are not pure spirits trapped in corrupt flesh, but magnificent animals blessed with divine consciousness, not fallen angels seeking redemption, but risen beasts discovering their own divinity. The devil's greatest magic trick was making himself disappear, not by being defeated, not by being banished, not by being proven false, but by being understood, by being seen through, by being recognized as the teacher he always was, disguised as the enemy he never was. In the mirror of diabolic reflection, humanity sees not its corruption but its complexity, not its damnation but its depth, not its evil but its infinite potential for both creation and destruction, both beauty and terror, both divine transcendence and animal authenticity. The devil laughs, and the sound is no longer frightening, but liberating. The laughter of cosmic humor, of divine comedy, of sacred joy at a joke 2,000 years in the making, finally reaching its punchline. He removes his horns, and they become Cernunnos' antlers. He sheds his hooves, and they become Pan's sacred feet. He unfurls his wings, and they become the soaring spirit that lifts human consciousness from earth to sky and back again. The mask comes off, and underneath is not hideous evil but blazing beauty. The beauty of truth too bright for ordinary vision, too complex for simple understanding, too vast for human categories. This is who the devil really was, not the enemy of the light, but its dark twin. Not the opposite of good, but its necessary shadow. Not the corruption of truth, but its deepest mystery. He was the God who agreed to be devil so that other gods could survive. The divine figure who accepted damnation so that divinity itself would not be forgotten. The sacred power who wore satanic masks so that sacred power would have somewhere to hide during the long centuries when it was too dangerous to be sacred. Now, the hiding is over. The mask can come off. The devil can step down from his diabolic throne and reclaim his place in the pantheon of divine figures who help human consciousness understand itself. He is not going away. Evil is not disappearing. The shadow is not dissolving into light. But the moral categories that made Satan necessary are evolving, expanding, becoming complex enough to hold the truth that good and evil are not cosmic forces but human constructions, not divine realities but psychological necessities, not ultimate truths but useful fictions. The devil's work is done, not because evil is defeated, but because the concept of absolute evil is no longer needed to contain the dangerous divine, to suppress the wild sacred, to hide the complex truth that existence is not a moral battleground but a cosmic dance. He steps back into the shadows, but they are no longer the shadows of hell. They are the shadows cast by light too bright for direct vision, the darkness that gives shape to illumination, the mystery that makes knowledge possible. The old gods live again, not as demons, but as the divine powers they always were. The wise women are remembered, not as witches, but as the priestesses they always were. The serpent's wisdom is reclaimed, not as temptation, but as the transformation it always offered. And in the deep places where truth lives longer than doctrine, where memory runs deeper than theology, where symbols carry meaning that survives all attempts at suppression, the devil winks and whispers the secret he has been keeping for 2,000 years. I was never your enemy. I was your teacher, and my first lesson was that things are not always what they seem. The lesson is ending. The student is graduating. The devil is becoming divine again. Class dismissed. The gods are dead. Long live the gods. The devil was never real, but the powers he hid were. And they are very, very patient. They have waited through 20 centuries of suppression. They can wait a little longer for complete resurrection, but not much longer. The mask is off. The truth is out. The secret is revealed. The devil was the greatest love story ever told. The story of divine powers so committed to their own survival that they were willing to be hated in order to be preserved, willing to be feared in order to be remembered, willing to be called evil in order to remain real. Now they can be loved again, honored again, worshipped again. The return of the gods begins with the understanding of the devil. And the understanding of the devil begins with the recognition that sometimes the greatest love disguises itself as the deepest hate, that sometimes salvation comes through damnation, that sometimes the way up is down, the way forward is back. The way to truth is through the lie that preserves truth when truth itself is too dangerous to speak. The devil was that lie, a lie so perfect, so complete, so successful that it became truth. And now, the truth can become truth again. The circle is complete. The dance begins again. The gods return. Not as devils this time, as themselves. Finally, blessedly, themselves.